Spurs fans, welcome to Utility Sports. In today's video, we are focusing solely on the San Antonio Spurs and giving them the attention and credit that they deserve that other media platforms just often don't give teams, especially like San Antonio in maybe what is perceived as a smaller market. But what I know about San Antonio Spurs fans is that you guys are super passionate about your team and you know a lot about your players. So I do want to commend you guys on that. A great group of fans, in my opinion. I see it from your comments on our channel. And if you are excited for the offseason, I know very tough end of the season, but if you're excited for the offseason and the future of this very young, very feisty San Antonio Spurs group, make sure to leave a like on today's video and also subscribe to the channel for more, because we're going to be covering everything about the NBA draft, a ton of NBA mock drafts, and of course the Spurs. They're in a really great position when it comes to the NBA draft. So this is the spot to be. We're going to be talking about that and more in the upcoming months. But in today's video, specifically the Spurs offseason preview. So again, if you do enjoy the video, leave a like as well. Let's go ahead and jump forward now into the video preview. This is the same thing we do in all of our offseason previews. We're going to go with the conclusion of the 2021-2022 season, my analysis, thoughts, and some bright spots, and the record, of course, as well, that the Spurs had this past season. And then we'll also take a look at some key decisions this team has to make, specifically regarding certain contract statuses, certain key areas of players that they could look to move on from, and the such like that. Then we head into the 2022 NBA draft, and we'll look at what assets they have, you know, their draft capital, and then also which actual prospects I think could be really good fits for this team. I do a lot of research on the NBA draft. So the NBA draft is kind of my biggest MO. I love spending time watching these prospects, and this is the best place to learn about which players could fit San Antonio. 2022 NBA free agency, we're going to look at their projected cap space and potential targets for this team. And that's always a fun thing to talk about for San Antonio, because typically they don't go out and spend a lot of money in free agency. I know they did it one time with LaMarcus Aldridge, but for the most part, they haven't done that. So we'll see exactly where they head in that direction this offseason. And then next season, we're going to look at the goals and aspirations and even the expectations that are now on this young group of players, because they did make it to the play-in tournament. They got some national recognition there in a game that was very competitive with New Orleans. So I do want to give the Spurs a lot of credit for the season they just had. And I also want to, commend them on where they got to this year in a very good, thrilling final game of the season that just didn't quite end the way they wanted it to. So now we'll focus on this past season. They finished with a 34-48 record, which typically probably won't be good enough to make the play-in tournament in the Western Conference, but it was a year with the West being a little bit down. Quite a few injuries occurred in the West, and it kind of opened the door for a very young Spurs team. I keep saying it, this team is extremely young, and it points to how bright the future could be here in San Antonio when you look at them long term. And of course, not to rub salt in the wound here, but they did lose in the 9-10 play-in game to the New Orleans Pelicans, which, that's a very tough place to be in, on the road there in a playoff type of atmosphere with a whole bunch of young guys. They fought, they clawed, and I think it did show a really good sign of what's to come in the future here for San Antonio. That game, very easily, they could have rolled over and died. You look at that situation there, down 17 or 18 points at the end of the third quarter, very, very tough just throughout the game. New Orleans was having a great game, and San Antonio, they battled, got it down to about 6 multiple times in the fourth quarter and never gave up. And you got to love that feistiness from a really young group of players. They've got dogs on this roster. I think not a lot of people really know that. They've got a lot of competitive players. And I think if they add a little bit more talent around those guys, the ceiling could go really, really high. Let's talk about one of those dogs on this team, and that's DeJounte Murray. He's the biggest sole bright spot on this roster. There's no denying that. All-star type season. And to be honest, if I had a vote in the NBA awards, I would give him my vote for most improved player of the year, because he made the jump from really good, I think everyone knew he was really good, to star. He is a certified star now. He averaged 21 points a game, 9 assists a game, which are both massive jumps for him. And I think the biggest thing with that is his defense didn't slide too far either. He is still a good defensive player, but really was asked to take a massive load offensively for this team, specifically when it comes to, replacing DeMar DeRozan, who was a massive loss for this team. And losing DeMar DeRozan, that's not an easy thing to replace, but DeJounte Murray stepped up massively. And I think given what was expected of him on every single night, he played so great this season. And Spurs fans, you got to be really happy about having the guy on your team who is a triple-double machine, one of the best all-around players in the league when it comes to involving others, rebounding the basketball. He's a pesky defender who can get in passing lanes, disrupt offensive players, and then also can put the ball in the basket. That's really where he took a massive step forward again this season. And I love it for him. They had a really great selection with him when they grabbed him. The development pathway has been phenomenal for him in San Antonio. They deserve a lot of credit for developing players. Of course, Gregg Popovich, receives a lot of that credit, but it's the whole staff. It's not just Pop. It's everyone there involved in San Antonio. They do a great job developing, and DeJounte's the latest example of this. We'll also move on to Keldon Johnson, who finished the year well. Maybe didn't have the playing game he was hoping to have, and if he does, maybe that swings things. But if you look at Keldon Johnson, specifically toward the end of the season, multiple games in a row finishing with over 20-plus points a game, and arguably was one of the best players on this team, if not the second best player, because obviously DeJounte, I think, was clearly the best player on this team this past year. But Keldon Johnson, specifically post-Derek White trade, did take a step forward. And while you move on from Derek White, to have Keldon Johnson really ascend and play the way he did to end the season, it's a really good bright spot here. And I think San Antonio, this is a little bit of a different offseason preview, because in some of the other ones, I'm talking about teams that had 20 wins, whereas San Antonio had 34. And it was a big difference there between a 20-win team and a 34-win team. So they do deserve a lot of credit for the season they had, specifically DeJounte and Keldon. Devin Vassell also took a massive step forward. I really liked him in his draft class, and I think, he's getting to that next level. And the playing game was another example of this here. He had 7 threes in the playing game, and his shooting is very, very good. I love his length and size defensively as well. For me, Vassell is a player who I think has a very high ceiling, and if he continues to develop, could become one of those star-type players next to DeJounte and Keldon. Now, I think he's got a little bit of a ways to go to get there, but I still think the potential is within reach for him. Jakob Poeltl had another really good season as well, and that can be confirmed by how much interest was found in him throughout the league. When I was covering the Spurs throughout the NBA trade deadline, it seems like pretty much any team that needed defensive help was interested in Jakob Poeltl, and I understand why. He's a really great rim protector, one of the best rim protectors in the league, honestly, and does not get a lot of credit for it. Now, he's got some of his own flaws, don't get me wrong, but I think Jakob Poeltl has come in a long way from when they got him in the Kawhi Leonard trade. And, obviously everyone focused on DeMar DeRozan in that, but Poeltl's a good success story in that deal as well. So for me, I like Poeltl here. I'm not sure if they're going to keep him. They do have a good asset in him if they want to move on from him. And we're going to talk about kind of that a little bit more going on in this video. Josh Primo, now statistically, did not have the season that he wanted to have, only shot about 37% from the field. And played about 19 minutes a night. So the minutes there is the thing I want to focus on the most, because for me, it is a bright spot that he got that much playing time. He was extremely young. He was the youngest player in his draft class when they took him. And yes, it was a surprise when they drafted him as high as they did. But the Spurs have a really good track record when it comes to drafting, and they have an even better track record when it comes to developing. When I look at and evaluate a player, I'm looking at what they've been, not necessarily what they could be, and I try to project what they could be, but it always is dependent on situation. And realistically, San Antonio is one of the best places to go when it comes to development. Every little drill that Popovich does in practice, and I've heard about it from other players and other coaches in the past, they talk about how he expects such high basketball IQ and such good decision making from his players, and the drills that he utilizes really lead to that. And I think Josh Primo is going to be a player who, a few years into that system, all of a sudden, he starts figuring things out. And I think there is some serious upside here with him. And I think one of the biggest areas is if he just gets a little bit more consistent finishing around the rim through contact, which is a struggle that most rookies have, most young guards deal with, then we could see that efficiency take a huge step forward. So, I'm not out on Primo. I don't think anyone else should be either. Looking at his stats, it suggests maybe you should be. But again, eye test always trumps stats. And watching him, I know that this kid's got something special down the road. And then the other bright spot here, in a season that you make the play, and you also made some trades where it looked like you were selling. So it's good because you had a competitive year. You finished the season really well, but you were also able to, at this point, acquire multiple draft picks, which is huge for a team. It's not very often you get to bring in a whole bunch of draft picks in a year and not completely bottom out. So I want to credit the Spurs front office for that as well. Moving on to some key decisions, Lonnie Walker, the fourth, is the first one here to focus on. He is headed to free agency, not unrestricted free agency. He could be an unrestricted free agent if they don't give him the qualifying offer. My guess is they will. He'll probably head toward restricted free agency. And for me, I think San Antonio is probably going to look to keep him. Played about 21 minutes a night. which for me, at this point of his career, you'd hope he'd be getting more than that. So I think that, if a team comes in with an offer sheet that's over what San Antonio is willing to offer initially, San Antonio probably would back out on it just because they feel like, hey, we have Primo, DeJounte Murray's our guy. We're going to go forward with those two if Lonnie Walker's price point gets a little too high. But at the same time, if it stays in a range that they feel comfortable with, I think they would match. I think they'd like to keep Lonnie Walker around, but ultimately, they're going to have a hard price point with him, and they have a lot of leverage here because of the guards that they've drafted, the other guards they've got around him. They don't need Lonnie Walker necessarily to be like any focal point for this rebuild and this retool there in San Antonio. They don't need that, so they have a lot of leverage here. Lonnie Walker's agent and camp's going to know that. Lonnie Walker himself is going to know that, and I think it's going to lead to a pretty good price point for them. I think he probably does stay, but we'll see exactly where he lands. Then there's also the question here about a consolidation move. They've got a lot of pieces on this roster, and the question for me is, can you kind of, package these and consolidate these pieces into maybe getting an actual star, someone who you put him next to DeJounte Murray, and you have a legitimate bona fide wing scorer or a bona fide pick and roll partner, something in that realm where you upgrade your roster, you upgrade your second or third best player at maybe the expense of your seventh, eighth, or ninth best player. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me in what could make some sense as a key decision. And then also the Josh Richardson deal. He does have 1 year left on his contract with the extension he got in Boston, so he is under contract for next year. Do you want to trade him? There was a lot of interest in him around the trade deadline, had a really good three-point shooting season, which historically maybe isn't as, realistic that we see that again. Maybe he just really likes to do Wilson ball and he shoots well with it. But I think the Spurs should maybe, shop him around a little bit, see what you could get from the Lakers, who are probably going to be trying to retool everything. If you can come out of that with, Taylor Horton Tucker and maybe a first-round pick down the road, I think that's very beneficial for San Antonio. And you see, Josh Richardson, sure, he's solid, but does he move the needle that much? To me, no. I think moving him for a down-the-road asset could actually be a really nice move for this team, given the fact that, if in 2027, if you all of a sudden have a top 10 pick from the Lakers, that's a pretty good outcome to me. Moving into our next key decision here, and it's not actually a decision the franchise gets to make, but it's the franchise's best ever head coach gets to make, and that's Gregg Popovich. He's 73 years old at the time I'm recording this, and he's been the head coach for San Antonio for 26 seasons. And you guys might know him best as the most winning coach of all time. He's been so awesome as an NBA head coach, so many championships, so many playoff runs. And, he's been there since Tim Duncan and the Admiral, and he's been a part of this Spurs team and the Spurs organization for so long that some Spurs fans that are watching this video might not have ever been alive when another coach was the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. He's the longest tenured head coach in the NBA. And the question is he done? Was the game against the Pelicans his last game coaching in the NBA, or will he keep going? And for me, as just a basketball fan solely, I want to see Gregg Popovich coach for one more year at least. I want to see him stay around. Let's add some more wins onto that win total. Let's push out the lead a little bit more even. Let's make that record almost unbeatable, because that would be awesome for me to see. I don't want Gregg Popovich to be done. It would be the end of an era there in San Antonio. And, I think he's got one more year in him at least. So I'm hoping to see that. It feels like every year now at this time of year, we're talking, is Popovich finally done? Is Pop going to hang up the clipboard? I hope not. I hope he stays coaching the San Antonio Spurs for at least one more year. What a great guy, really great coach. And I think that the Spurs organization is quite frankly better with him as their head coach. Let's move on to the NBA draft. Of course, probably the main topic of discussion here for a lot of you Spurs fans. I know you've been very active in my mock drafts, giving me your thoughts and opinions, and it's good. I'm glad to have those opinions in here. So here's the assets you guys have. You have your own 2022 first round pick. And if you're curious what your lottery odds are, go ahead, go back to my NBA draft lottery video. There'll be a card for it in this video, and it'll explain exactly how the NBA draft lottery works. And it'll even show the odds for the San Antonio Spurs for this draft in there. Then also the Raptors 2022 first round pick. They have a Celtics 2022 first round pick from the Derek White trade. Of course, the Raptors one comes from the Thad Young trade, which I think was a really good deal for San Antonio. And then they have the Lakers 2022 second round pick. So for me here, you got four pretty solid assets. You have ways to move these up if you want to. Again, this could be another example of a consolidation trade. You can use 2 or 3 of these picks if you want to try and make a big a play for a big name. Or if you want to, you could maybe package the Raptors Celtics pick and try and move up back into the lottery. Maybe you package Raptors Celtics Lakers and try and get back into the top 10. You've got some pathways here to really improve this roster and have a nice squad going into next year. But in this video, we're going to focus on draft targets for each pick, specifically in the first round. So with their own first round pick, here's the guys that I think are most likely. And this is assuming they don't move into the top 4, which is very possible they could. The top 4 prospects, of course, are Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith, and Jaden Ivey in no specific order. But with assuming they stay right around that 10 spot where they're kind of projected to be, here's the guys I'm looking at. Center Jalen Duren from Memphis. And you might be saying, well, we have Jakob Poeltl and you deemed him as a bright spot. Yes, I did. But remember, it's very possible they can move him. Again, if you're going to make a consolidation move or you send him out, you could bring in another lottery level asset for him and maybe kind of reshape this team into what is more of a modern NBA style, where you get away from the traditional rim protector and you get to a rim protector who's also very switchable out in space in Jalen Duren. I really do like this kid out of Memphis. Keegan Murray, I think he's probably the fan favorite here in San Antonio. I think a lot of Spurs fans really, really want him, and I don't blame him. I mean, he's like the perfect filler 4 that you'd be looking for as a Spurs fan. You know, someone who can play next to Keldon, play strong, can rebound the basketball, very opportunistic scorer, just knows how to put the ball in the hoop. And I think that's a really underrated quality, honestly. You know, maybe isn't the most flashy skilled player, but just gets the job done. And I feel like that's a very San Antonio-esque thing. So I think he's going to be highly favored from you guys, from my viewers here in the comment section. Walker Kessler, Mark Williams as well. I have them in here. If you aren't able to get Jalen Duren and you don't end up moving up in the draft, Kessler, Williams, maybe not as ready as Duren, I think, to take a bigger role. But what I think that those 2 guys could do is spell Jakob Poeltl very well. And I think here, if you're San Antonio, if you do keep Jakob Poeltl, you still need a backup center at some point. So Walker Kessler, Mark Williams, not bad options here. I think actually really good options. Kessler, very similar to Poeltl. So I think if you want to have another rim protector behind Poeltl, you just rotate these 2 in the game. Don't really lose the rim protection element. Does make a lot of sense to me. And Mark Williams, a little bit more athletic, probably a little bit better as a lob catcher, and I think gives you a different element, different dynamic there. But again, I could see either or. I also have forward Jeremy Sohan listed. I don't think it's likely they would take him, but if you want to look for a defensive, piece that is very fun, Swiss Army knife, you can use him to guard 1 through 5. Think about, Spurs fans, what you saw in Herb Jones against you in the play-in. Jeremy Sohan's kind of like that. Maybe not as much of a playmaker defensively in terms of getting steals and blocks, but fundamentally and positionally is excellent. He's going to be in the right spot at the right time all the time. And I think that's something that Popovich would love. I think Spurs management would love that. And I think Spurs fans themselves would really, really appreciate that, watching the product on the floor. Jeremy Sohan, I'm very high on him. I think he'd be a really good add for this Spurs team. Moving on now to the Raptors first round pick. Other options I think that could make some sense. And you can see here I'm really targeting the forward spot. Given the fact they took Primo last year, I think, with some of these picks, they're going to probably really heavily look forward. Now, Mark Williams, Walker Kessler, let's assume one of them falls here to where Toronto's pick lies. Then I would see them probably take one of those guys. If any of the guys in the last slide are still here available, they probably would take one of those guys. But assuming those are all off the board, I look at Tari Eason, the forward out of LSU. Physically, one of the best players in this class. Very strong, very mobile, very athletic. And he can play that 4 position. He's kind of like what we've seen from Keegan Murray, except maybe a little bit more aggressive as a finisher. Now, I think his skill set's not as good as Keegan Murray from the perimeter. And I don't think he's as sound when it comes to basketball IQ. But I think Tari Eason is an intriguing prospect here that Spurs fans would love to have. Liddell, very similar as well to kind of what we saw with Jeremy Sohan. Very versatile defensive forward, can protect the rim, average nearly 3 blocks a game for the Ohio State Buckeyes, can also shoot the 3 ball with a little bit of consistency, and also knocks down the mid-range jumper with ease. So a skilled player who can play on both ends of the floor. And then here I got a player with high upside, Nikola Jovic. I don't think a lot of people really know about him yet. And no, that's not a typo. I'm not talking Nikola Jokic. I am talking Nikola Jovic. I know the NBA just can't get more confusing, right? But this Serbian wing is very fun to watch because he's got good playmaking feel. Stands at about 6'10", so he's an intriguing prospect because he can get to the rim, can finish. He's not the most athletic guy on the court, pretty much ever. But what he is going to be very reliable, and he has a skill set based game. And I think that's going to be something that San Antonio would like to add. And I also have forward Kendall Brown. He's similar to Jovic, but I think his skill set's not quite as progressed, but he is more athletic. So San Antonio, a team that I think could use a little bit more athleticism. Kendall Brown could work as well. But if you're looking for the skill set oriented version of the draft, or you're looking for a player who is, I think, a little bit more NBA ready in terms of, his ability on the perimeter specifically, Jovic, I think, fits the bill a little bit better than Kendall Brown. Now here we are with the Celtics first round pick, and a little bit deeper in the draft now, of course, because the Celtics finished the season so strong after getting Derek White. But here, again, it depends on what goes ahead, because if you don't draft a center, you probably would want to take a center here. If you don't draft a forward, you probably want to take a forward. And I also have a guard listed here as well, because he's got pretty good upside to him that I think they could consider. So forward Trevor Keels here from Duke. Again, very NBA ready body. He's strong, physical, can get to the rim, and started playing with more aggression down the back end of the season that I really liked for him, finishing out the year for the Blue Devils. Guard Bryce McGowan, he's 6'7", so I don't want you to think, oh no, not another little guard here. Trust me, he's not little by any stretch. He's got really good length and size to him at the 6'7" guard position. And then you look at what he's going to be able to do. He's a mid-range shot creator. Now, he struggled with consistency and efficiency for Nebraska, but again, this is another long-term approach here. If you take Bryce McGowan, you're probably not expecting year 1 or year 2 contributions from him. You're looking more at year 3, year 4, year 5 of that rookie deal, where you maybe start to see more of him. Probably would spend a lot of time in the G League, developing his game, sharpening his craft, and then comes into the NBA down the road, especially after you have more clarity with what, Lonnie Walker is going to do for you. And you get to really see what Josh Primo is. Bryce McGowan's could be a nice little addition down the road. Jamarian Sharp, first time I'm including him in one of these offseason previews. He's a 7'5" center who gets a ton of blocks a game from Western Kentucky. Now, he comes off the bench, which this is a crazy thing here. I'm talking about a guy who came off the bench being a potential first round pick. For the most part, I look at him as a second round selection, but I do see a way that San Antonio would say, well, this could be intriguing for us. He actually moves his feet laterally fairly well for his size. I think he can defend out on the perimeter against some fours. Now, I'm not saying against every four, and I'm not saying it's a great matchup that you should want to have, but he's more capable than you would expect just looking at him. And then the one thing he does great is protect the rim. He's very, very big. You expect that from a 7'5" guy. It's just tough to score around. So if you are looking for a little bit of rim protection and you don't get one with one of the first 2 picks that you have in this draft, Jamarian Sharp could make some sense. Forward Johnny Juzang and forward Ron Harper Jr. here, both on here for the same reason. They're NBA ready guys. Juzang more offensively, Ron Harper Jr. more of a defensive minded forward. Both of them though, good. I think both of them come into the NBA, have nice 10-year careers. Ron Harper Jr. is the son of a former NBA player, and we know what Johnny Juzang did for UCLA. So I think both of these guys are good options here for San Antonio. If this pick is, in the back end of the first round where it's projected to be, where it's going to be. So for me here with that, maybe they're not true first round, guys that you're going to see in a ton of mocks. But what I think is that if you're already taking guys earlier, if you're looking to just address fit and need and fill a position, Juzang, Harper Jr. both can do that for you right away. Moving into NBA free agency, and they do have a projected cap space of nearly $25 million. You see it there, $24.792 million in projected practical cap space. That is the 3rd most projected in the NBA this offseason. And they can also use their non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is up to about $10 million. So with the free agency targets, you notice I put DeAndre Ayton's name and crossed it out. The reasoning why, it's just not very Spursy to go out and sign a player like DeAndre Ayton. Are they going to give a max to Ayton? I don't think so. It would be intriguing, especially if you have a Jakob Poeltl deal on draft night where you trade him, bring in another lottery pick, say from Charlotte, and then you're able to go forward with two lottery picks, 2 other first-round picks, and then you go out and sign DeAndre Ayton. I do think that's a really good outcome. I just don't see it as likely. I just don't see it happening. So I did cross DeAndre Ayton out. I think it'd be a phenomenal move for them. I just don't think it's going to happen. Thomas Bryant is a player who makes more sense. He's been a long-term starter in the NBA, probably out of a job there in Washington, just given the situation there with their centers. So he could make some sense. He started a ton of games, pretty solid all-around center. And you could bring him in to be your spell guy too, Jakob Poeltl. Jalen Smith as well, another player who kind of found his footing now after getting traded from Phoenix over to Indiana. Started averaging about 13 and 7 toward the back half of the season after the trade deadline. So he's interesting, can step out and shoot the three ball a little bit as well. Not sure he moves the needle a ton, but I think San Antonio maybe could look at it. They did it last year with a move for a guy like Zach Collins, who's a former lottery pick and just could never stay healthy for Portland. Maybe they do it now with another former lottery pick in Jalen Smith, who, just didn't end up fitting with the team that drafted him. Rajon Rondo I have listed here as well, unrestricted free agent. Spurs fans, I know what you're thinking. Whoa, we got point guards. We don't need Rajon Rondo. And I put a picture of him with the Celtics intentionally here because I want to say he's not the same guy he was with the Celtics. This isn't a big, he's going to compete for minutes type of guy anymore. This isn't a, he's going to clash with the head coach anymore type of player. He has really changed his persona and the way he fits onto a roster and a team. Specifically in the last 3 or 4 years. He's really matured as a person, and I think he's actually a really great locker room addition. You heard Darius Garland talk about it this year. The moment he got traded to the Cavs, he was going through film with Darius Garland, teaching him a lot of tricks. And let's be honest about it, Rajon Rondo is one of the smartest people in the NBA. Not just players, people, including coaches, scouts. Rajon Rondo knows the game of basketball. And if you want to bring him in a veteran role, I do think he can play minutes for you, but he doesn't necessarily have to. He's gotten a lot of DNP CDs in the last, 2 years. And by that, I mean, did not play coaches' decisions. So, with him, it's not like he's not going to ruffle feathers, but he's going to be a really good help to DeJounte Murray. And if you want to help mentor and further DeJounte's career and really, breed more success for him, I really do think Rajon Rondo is a great example of what an addition could be that could help this Spurs team. I really, really do. Now I have Nathan Knight on here, restricted free agent, and I'm sure a lot of Spurs fans don't even know who this is. He is like the third or fourth forward for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you might be saying, why is that something we should look at? Well, the last game of the season, when he actually got a little bit of playtime, played about, I think, 11 minutes in that game, maybe 10 minutes, scored 17 points, had a poster dunk, really good passer of the basketball at the four-man position, can bring it up the court. I actually think he's a really interesting prospect and player that maybe if you can sign him to a $5 or $6 million a year deal, when you have all this cap space that I don't really see a way that they really go out and use a lot of it, Nathan Knight could be an interesting player to steal away from Minnesota. You give him a 2-year, $12 million contract. I know Nathan Knight's going to sign that in a heartbeat, and I know Minnesota is not going to match that. I 100% guarantee you they would not. But it gives you a really free trial run right now, especially if you're not planning on going out and signing a bigger free agent. You could use part of your mid-level exception to make that deal. So you could basically get a free trial with him. And it's like trading for a young player, but you don't have to give up anything other than cash. So it's a pretty good option. Again, if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. But if it does, you maybe have something in him. He's very athletic. And again, pretty good passer of the basketball and really, really strong. He's actually more skilled than I think anyone really would ever give him credit for. So for me, I think he's someone who's going to break into the Wolves rotation down the road if no one else signs him this offseason. So I think San Antonio, if they have a chance, pretty good option here for them and a player that I don't think a lot of people are really aware even exists. Moving into next season, and this is really, the biggest part. The offseason is always fun, but we want the next season to get here and we want to see success. And I think that there's going to be some success here for San Antonio. We're going to see more growth from DeJounte Murray, specifically as a scorer. I think he could be up to 23, 24 points a game next year. I think Keldon Johnson is going to continue to grow and improve. Devin Vassell, I see, a big pathway for him to becoming a really good player in the NBA. And then Josh Primo, I have the asterisk next to him. I think Spurs fans, you guys are probably waiting for him. You're probably like, yes, Josh Primo, if he continues developing, we're going to get to where we need to go. And I do see that to a certain extent. So I think those four guys are probably the ones that need the most development because I think they're the ones who can really ascend this franchise back to where they were, a few years ago. And the hope is to be a playoff team, and they're going to probably make it back to the play-in. They're going to at least be right there, knocking on the doorstep. And remember, I started this video by saying 34-48 probably doesn't get you to the play-in very consistently in the West. I think next year the West is going to be a little bit better again, but I still think the Spurs have a shot in it. I see them, improving. I could see them around 500. They might go 40-42, maybe 39-43, potentially 41-41. And if they do, they're going to be right there in that conversation. They could outright maybe even have a home game in the play-in tournament, whether that's, as a 7 seed or as a 9 seed. I could see it. So we'll see exactly what happens with San Antonio. But I think that they're in a good position. They have some money. I'd like to see them be aggressive. Let me know your thoughts on the DeAndre Ayton situation. I don't think that's going to be in play, but maybe Spurs fans, you have a different feeling about it. So let me know. And hopefully you guys did enjoy. Spurs fans, I want to commend you again. Very passionate fan base. I know you guys don't get the love from national media like you deserve. So I do want to give you guys a shout out yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy the content. Hit that notification bell if you want to see more of my videos here at Utility Sports. And again, huge thank you guys so much. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.